Rahwa comes to us from Push Buffalo. I had this conversation with her before we started. I said, there's no way I'm going to even try to introduce you. You've got such a rich and diverse CV. So I'm going to let Rahwa do that herself. Could I just, you'll see, I think you might see on your screen as a notice has come up to say that this meeting is being recorded. The only part that we're recording is this introduction and Rahwa's presentation. So we won't be recording our discussions or your comments or questions about that. So just to be really clear about your confidentiality around that. And so without further ado, I am delighted to hand over to Rahwa. Really looking forward. Rahwa, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. I know some of you are on the West Coast. I just really want to start by saying that, Peter, we just met today, but you feel like an old friend to me. And I really loved everything that you said, just like resonates in my bones. Like this is really the work, right? And we're all just in practice of it. Like none of this is perfect. It's super messy. I actually give a thing where I go, if it doesn't feel messy and gross sometimes, you're not doing it right. If you feel safe and you're not doing it right, because this work is hard. And we should just lean into that and really appreciate it and create the necessary supports to help us get through it together. So a little bit about me. I have a very strange name. I don't have a beautiful accent like Peter, unfortunately. But Rahwa, I'm originally born in Eritrea, which is in East Africa along the Red Sea, and born in the middle of a civil war, really due to European colonialism, right? And so I often say that I was born kind of with like this fist in my hand and like this idea of people power and social justice. So I just come from that naturally. And then was lucky enough to, after having escaped Eritrea, lived in Sudan for a couple of years. And then through the immigration system, my family and I all came to Western New York. That's where we were resettled. And so Buffalo, New York, in particular, the west side of Buffalo, I was in the first wave of immigrants and refugees back in the middle 80s. So I'm really aging myself now. And it's an interesting place in that we are now the second highest, most resettled mid-sized city in America. There are people from all over the world. My son, who is in second grade, he's a 7-year-old. He goes to the international school that's just right around the corner from the headquarters of Push Buffalo. And there are 86 languages spoken there with all the dialects. Now, that is really meaningful, and I think it's important. So I'm really just doing some context setting for y'all, and I hope you find it lovely, because I love to, tell stories as a way to kind of get us to be thinking and shifting and thinking differently about how we see development. And so Buffalo currently is the third poorest city in America. It is the sixth most segregated city in America. When I first got here, it was the fourth most segregated. Why is that important? Well, we have to look at root causes, right? But at one point, Buffalo was the sixth largest economy in the world. We are known as having, city of paved streets. Obviously, Tesla was here. So, city of lights, all kinds of, like we actually fed the whole entire world through our grains, and we still have the silos all over to kind of show us that history. It went all the way to Egypt and, Saudi Arabia and China, like France. That's where all that good bread is from France. Well, it came from here. I think that's really important. And so it's got a very rich history. We had, beautiful architecture. It's probably one of the most well-designed cities. We've had Olmsted and the parks and all of that. Yet we are the third poorest city in America. And I think that means something. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me actually start with how I normally start, which is to do a land acknowledgement. Because everything that we do, and if you're actually going to look at everything in America through an equity lens, I think it is really important to kind of start with a land acknowledgement in that wherever we are, all of us, somewhere in the United States, we're all standing on stolen land. I am coming to you from Haudenosaunee territory, land of the Seneca and the Six Nations. And the other thing that we have to remember as I talk about the addressing the root cause issues and why we do development the way we do, is that this country was built by stolen labor of African people. And I think it is incredibly important in this moment as we are addressing really big existential issues, in particular, the climate crisis, and how we think we are going to save our planet, that we really need to understand our entire way of how we think about our economy and reshifting that. And so it's really important for us to always acknowledge, and if you don't know where the territory that you're standing on, to do that research. So I believe a lot in this idea of indigenous sovereignty, land repatriation, and Black reparation. And I think it's really important to name that today because we're talking about affordable housing and land use. The other thing I would really like to do today is, I believe in revolutionary love. I believe in serving a positive purpose. You can serve a purpose of positive or negative in the world. I was taught to serve a positive purpose and to always sit in that when I'm struggling. And I think it's really important to also talk about the practice of social justice work and revolutionary love. Love is not something that makes us feel good. That's a part of it too, right? There's beauty in it, there's hardship in it, but love is an action, it's a verb. And revolutionary love is about, also speaks to the struggle and being a warrior. So, how can you be a warrior sage? That's, that healthy tension. And I think that it's really important to name, in particular in this moment in the country, that we stand in solidarity with our Asian brothers and sisters. And we need to do that across the board because when they come for some of us, they come for all of us. That is, whether you're a Black person in this country, whether you're an Indigenous person, LGBTQ community, Latinx, Latin, even white folk, poor people, they're going to come for us. And so we have to stand in solidarity with each other. So I implore you to see what's happening on social media and get your name and everybody out there and stand in solidarity and support and send that community cover and love. So, all right. Gotten that out of the way, we're going to go ahead and get started with my PowerPoint presentation. Let me see if I can do the slideshow. Let's see here. Share screen. Give me one moment, please. And done this play. Can you all see it as a slideshow? Great. So Push Buffalo, which stands for People United for Sustainable Housing, and I call it a just transition story. How many of you are familiar with a just transition? Feel free to either just come off mute and say you are or raise your hand. Great. Thank you so much, Ned. I saw your hand. So we have several sort of theories and pedagogies that we work from and how we think about community development. Push Buffalo was founded 15 years ago, really by two organizers. We're an organizing organization. So we reached out to about 400 people in our community, all considered low income. I say that they are communities that are extracted from and underestimated. And so these 400 people came together and we asked them, what do you want to see where you live? And they were able to imagine and become resident urban planners and designers and architects and create a vision for their community. And what they did is they addressed what are the challenges in this community? Also, what are the assets in this community? And so the challenges they were very, very clear about, all of them had to do with racial inequality, economic inequality, a lack of access to opportunity, the need for quality, affordable, livable housing, and the need for good paying jobs, because most of the people in our community worked, but a household of four was making something about $19,000 a year. Our housing stock, most of it is over 100 years old, built beautiful, built to last, built before insulation was ever invented in Buffalo, New York, a cold weather region, as well as, obviously, as I said, heavily disinvested. And so, our gas bills, oftentimes people may pay more for their heating than they do their rent or their mortgage in the cold winter months, which keeps people in a cycle of poverty. So those are the issues that we are trying to address. Some of the assets though in the community, we had a lot of handymen, a lot of people that knew how to actually fix and build houses and things like that. So anyway, all that to say, we kind of landed on this theme of how do we achieve this just transition? So the strategy, currently we live in an extractive economy. The worldview there is built on colonialism, heteropatriarchy, fossil fuel extraction, consumerism, our resources. Currently we have a very linear way of how we do production, which is dig, burn, dump, right? That's how, but we live on a planet that has finite resources. What is the purpose? We have the enclosure of wealth at the top. 80% of the wealth is actually up here. So the purpose is driven, it's profit driven, right? Our work more and more actually becomes exploited. Americans are working longer hours, earning less money. And then our governance, most people say that we live in a democracy. Yes, aspirationally we do, and hopefully we'll get there. But the reality is that most of our budget goes to the military, which means we have a militaristic governance structure. So what do we do, right? What do we do to build better communities, healthier communities, ones that is, centering people and planet? And so our solution is that we have to stop the bad, which is this extractive way of being, and build new systems that are actually much more circular and virtuous. And we do that by divesting from that extractive economy. So we have to starve that machine, and we have to invest, which it means feed and grow our concepts of what it means to center in our sacredness, which is about all living things, whether you're talking about people, plants, animals, all of it, right? And what I love is that it actually has this value filter. The value filter looks exactly like a rain garden that can, remediate the soil and make it fresh and healthy again, right? And so this is what that looks like. And we build these systems all the time. And it's about shifting economic control to communities, drawing down that money. I think Peter talked a little bit about how do we actually have these investments that are, if you want an equity structure, you drive the investments where they're needed most. Democratize wealth in the workplace, advance ecological restoration, drive racial justice and social equity, relocalize most production and consumption, and retain and restore cultures and traditions. And from that, what gets you is a worldview that is actually centering our humanity, built on caring and sacredness. Our resources are using the things that, the systems already provide, like solar and wind and geothermal. It is really looking at work being more cooperative and doing it in a way that allows us to have better connection to family, better work-life balance, greater opportunities for civic engagement. That way we can build, our purpose should be rooted in ecological and social well-being. And then our democracy can be deep democracy. And how we do that, when we draw that power down to the ground and the roots, is that we have to redistribute how we think about not just power, but wealth and also civic engagement. If you have any questions, just shout it out, because I'm doing this presentation so I can't see everyone's face. And so how do we do this? We do it by centering the people first. And our people in our community, you see them, it's intergenerational, it's multiracial. And how we think about intergenerational is we have to understand where we came from. So we already know that we stand on the shoulders of giants and a history behind us that is propelling us, hopefully 7 generations forward, right? Because we have to think about the future. These are our people, meet them. They go from the babies to the elders, and they do know what they want where they live. And they are the resident leaders, they are the resident directors. They give us they have the local history and knowledge. And where do we practice this just transition? It's really an arbitrary map that we drew. It's called the Green Development Zone. You see how funny looking it is. And we picked this area because it was the poorest, it's literally the 3rd poorest neighborhood in the entire country 15 years ago. But what made it exciting to us is, if you go to the left of this map that you can't see, or my right, is one of the most stable neighborhoods in the country. And we knew from seeing what happened on both coasts that eventually this area was going to gentrify, which meant let's get ahead of that gentrification machine to see if we can build a concentration of affordability and reduce the amount of displacement that would occur. And it's a multi-pronged approach. My focus is going to be affordable housing and land use, but we do things like we weatherize homes. We do home repair programs for homeowners. We actually buy land, build affordable housing, but also and supportive housing, but we also build renewable energy projects to continue not only reduce the burden of energy, but also produce our own energy, own it as a way to build community wealth. And every single one of those things is a workforce opportunity. So here are just some examples of what that looks like and how we've done it. So I'm just going to talk to you about one of our projects, which is School 77. And so this is how we start our community planning. We use a lot of colors. We use very clear and direct language. And so all of our work starts with community organizing. That is like the greatest amount of our organizational resources goes to our organizing department. We use organizing, base building, and community education and engagement as the levers that then create the policies, and we take the policy wins and then turn them into economic development opportunities. So all the work, which is a variety of programs, we have green affordable housing development, green infrastructure as pathways to employment, but also addressing water, health, quality, and land island heat effect. Create pathways to green jobs, assist families and businesses to create weatherization resources. This is what it looks like. I mean, it's really kind of basic, right? We put out posters to the community. We have an annual community congress. We schedule people up to 4 blocks because we do a block by block approach and say, what little zip code, what little block do you live in? They sit there and they are able to articulate for us, what are the vacant properties, derelict lots, what opportunities are there to rebuild, create community gardens, whatever it is that they want there, right? Pocket parks for kids. And so as you can see, people are putting down all of their little sticky notes about what they want. And this is how we prioritize the need, because not everyone's going to get what they want. We just take the thing that most people want to work on together and work on that. So here were the project goals for School 77: to purchase the school from the city of Buffalo. It's a school built in 1927. It was actually a Native American school to start with, was vacant for a period of about 10 years. And because our neighborhood is very quickly gentrifying, there were big developers and people that were from outside the community looking at that. And so the community members that live in that neighborhood were very concerned and said, hey, Push, I just want you to know, like, people are really trying to buy this up for high-end lofts. So their goal was also to transform School 77 into a mixed-use community hub for the West Side and to create affordable housing for seniors to ensure that community voices lead the conversation around community development. Here's a little bit of the history of the building. And as you can see, it was in 2014 that we began planning process to renovate the building after a community congress session in very cold February. These are the ways that we engage the community of how we begin to then take control of this building. So the first thing that we did is this little cute card. It says, I support Bush Buffalo. And, we print them up in-house, 4 up. And we had our community congress in February. We put the plan together for how we were going to do our community engagement and outreach in March. April 1st, the organizing team hit the ground running. And in 1 month, they collected over 660 of these little comment cards. And what we did is we then went to our city hall, our common council member, dumped all the cards on his desk and said, listen, Councilman Rivera, the community has spoken. They want Push Buffalo to take over this building. And he looked at us, and that's power, right? People power. We don't have other power. We have people power. So he took all that, put it back in the bag, took it to community planning and development. He said, the community has spoken. We really need to put a moratorium on sale or developer designation of this building for 1 year to see if the community can figure out what they want to do. These are all the locations, the little middle dot of people that we engage to get those comment cards. And then here's just some of the outreach materials that we use as we were continuing to have meetings. The major themes that arose are just, affordable housing, community center, culture, education, recreation, stuff for youth. Here's just a couple of planning sessions. As you can see, we do a lot of charrettes, a lot of butcher paper, and it's really about asking people, are we going to reimagine what happens here? And we collected over 600 comment cards, or about 800 things that people wanted us to do in this 80,000 square foot building. We weren't possibly going to do that. So every meeting we filter and filter and filter and filter. We have a criteria that we use. We did teach-ins on what kind of housing. There were 3 priorities for housing: seniors, affordable housing, and community development. And then we did a 3-part Housing won because it was the thing that we could actually do and cost the least amount of money. So Lisk Buffalo came and did some of that. And so here's the way that the community, we don't get to decide, by the way, we as staff are just stewards to say, we have to give you a container because I can't build you the Taj Mahal because I don't have those kinds of resources, right? But we can be the container for how we think, how much resources we think we can pull down based on what the community wants. And so here's just some ways of choosing our commercial tenants. We decided that the community decided that they wanted the auditorium to be some kind of a performance center. They decided that the gymnasium needed to remain a programming for youth and elders, and they wanted as many community spaces as possible. But we did have enough space below the top 2 floors where it would be affordable housing for it to be headquarters for Push Buffalo. We just said we needed that because we were running out of space. We had multiple offices. It wasn't working for us. And then how were we going to choose the other tenants? And so this is what happened. And people in our community that were potential prospective tenants got to present to our community development committee, which is our members. And so some of the questions, do they serve a local neighborhood residents or young people? Are they an arts organization that reflects the diversity of the community? Are they a not-for-profit or for-profit business? If it's for-profit, is it affordable to local neighborhood residents? Meaning whatever that amenity is, can we afford it and do we want it? Do they provide a service that is not already being met on the west side? Because we don't want to, competition is good, but only to a certain extent. Do they provide opportunities for local hiring? Because remember, everything we do has to have a workforce component for people that are, men and women in our neighborhood to get those good jobs. Here are some ways that we did a lot of public events for this. One of the things is we have, we work at the intersections of racial, economic, and climate justice. And we had a climate justice committee that was interested in working on a regulatory around community solar. No community solar had happened in New York State. So they were advocating that we put community solar on the roof of School 77. So we did some events. This is called the Solar Jam. And then we had tours and things to some of our other housing that did actually have what solar was. And then we used things like these fun little boxes with foil and stuff on them to show people how, AC, DC converters, and how like solar actually works and how you can make those investments. This is what this building looked like. As you can see, pretty broken up, pretty old and what have you. And then here's just some of the ways that we showed people opportunities. This is the auditorium. As you can see, it was leaking water. This is the gymnasium. Looks gorgeous, looks nothing like that now. And then here are some ways that we could, thought about flexible space and what have you. So once we picked the design team, they also had to come to every single community meeting. This is a really great timeline. So this is when we started a community congress. This green map, a line or arrow, just shows you that is how development happens. It's very linear. This is how we do it. All the time, we have to have community meetings, engagements, and all the way. So we have these like virtuous circles that go there. Every time a big meeting had to happen, like these big community workshops, it was when the development committee that met monthly would say, whoa, this is too big of a decision. We have to take that back to the community. Other things that we did in this time where we went on learning journeys. People showed us other schools that had been renovated, other facilities that were kind of that size to begin to reimagine and imagine how the spaces should look. Here's a couple of the participatory sessions. So some of our design teams came and blew them up. We drew these little cutouts. They got to decide how many shrubs, how many parking spaces, how many of them were going to be for people that, with disabilities. And then they got to walk because there's 4 entrances into the building. And, I'm a gym user. I'm the local senior resident. I'm the after, so all the different ways and how we engage so that we can make decisions about where the entrances were going to be. Because some of them had to be limited. For example, the residential entrance, unless you live there, you can't access that space. And then here is actually our hiring hall workers. They help part of the construction. So part of the community benefit agreement for how we did the bid is that they had to keep all the subs and all the contractors had to hire at least 10 of our hiring hall workers through the whole entire project. And then if any of them hired them, when we encouraged hiring our folks, that means we had other people coming in line to get experience in actually building. And this is our crew of men and women that got to put the solar, the first 100% affordable community solar project in the entire state of New York, went up on the School 77. And yeah, so this is how we people can sign up for either weatherization or to become workers with us. Here's some great infrastructure projects. And then this is the school afterwards. You can't see it, but on the other side, we said they wanted the space to be intergenerationally programmed. So the gymnasium during the day has senior Pilates. Sometimes they do yoga. In the evening, they have basketball games or soccer games. Around the corner on the other side of this entrance, there's a little pocket park for 5 to 12-year-olds. We actually did a focus group with 5 to 12-year-olds, and they got to help design what it would look like, the materials, the colors, the actual activity that it would have. And as you can see, we have at every single corner places for people to sit and build community with each other. So there are benches and benches designed all over this place. Here are some other ways that we think about green affordable housing. This building on the left was sat vacant for over a decade. We use materials. We use hardy board plank. We use, metal roofs because they last longer. They're better conductors. They also, you can recycle them at the end of their lives. We use the hardy board plank because it comes pre-painted, so we're not releasing any kind of pollution into the air. Also, they're better conductors, as well as they're made out of cement, so you can technically recycle them at the end of their lives. So that's how we try to be very thoughtful. The house here, the green one, is our first net zero house that was built in Buffalo. I mean, actually it was renovated, so it's a renovation project. And 43 men and women from our neighborhood got to rebuild that house. House next to it, the one on top, has everything that the net zero house has, except we were not able to tap into the geothermal system, and it was very, very expensive, but it does have radiant heated floors on the front and back. 81 people helped rebuild that, including 80 of them that were returning citizens through a partnership with CEO, Center for Equal Opportunity. Here is our Push Green program, connecting people to power and energy. So we do a lot of work weatherizing homes for people and home repair programs, again, to reduce their energy burdens and begin to build wealth. Here are just a couple of our folks doing some community outreach and around that and letting folks know about it. And here's just some systems impact. Around the last 15 years, we've invested about $60 million into affordable housing and green infrastructure. More than 1,000 homes transformed through weatherization and green retrofit opportunities, more than 100 green jobs created, over 200 workers trained, more than 130 million invested in weatherization across the state. We helped create that policy, Green Jobs, Green New York, and then we became the Western New York agency that helps to implement those strategies. So that's the thing about how do you take organizing policy wins and then bring them down to the ground so that we have real benefits. More than 90 million of infrastructure, green infrastructure supports. And then lastly, I always end with this. We have to think about our, future. So educating future generations. And what we say often is what the hands do, teach the heart. As we think about so much trauma that has continued over millennia, how do we as human beings begin to take control of that? And I think that's a really big part of it. I also think that whatever I was going to say just completely escaped my thoughts. So I'm going to end there. I hope you enjoyed that, and I would love to take any questions you have.
Rahwa, I don't quite know what to say. I found that completely inspirational. Even though you and I have not met, I feel the same about you. I think there's a real, we're sister and brothers from different mothers, maybe. Even though different countries as well. So I found what you said, I think the best word for it is inspirational. And I can imagine the meetings that you're in, and I would defy anybody to say no to you based on your energy and the passion that you bring into this. I have a question.